Welcome Wargamers, this is Doug with 2 Plus Tough, and today we are talking all about the Slaanesh Start Collecting Box. This review was requested by several of you, and I do apologize that it took so long to get it out. Frankly, I did a review of the new rules that they got in the General's Handbook 2017, and then with the holidays, and I have just been sick over and over again, losing my voice this holiday season. It's been rough. So I actually filmed that separately, so that's going to come out this week in a separate video. But this video, I just want to focus on the actual Start Collecting Box in typical fashion that we've always done before. Reason being, I'm sure the General's Handbook will evolve and change, so I want to keep discussions about those rules separate, even though they're so related. So like I said, they're going to come out the same week, very close to one another, however, they're going to be separate videos. As always, if you have a question you'd like answered, whether it's Age of Sigmar lore or Start Collecting Box reviews, I only have 2 more, I believe, go ahead, click subscribe, leave it in the comments down below. I read every single comment and respond to as many as possible, and of course I use many of them as inspiration for future videos, giving you guys credit whenever I can. So without further ado, let's dive into the Slaanesh Start Collecting Box. Now of course I say Slaanesh Start Collecting Box, but actually it's the Daemons of Slaanesh to be more specific, and in this box you get an Exalted Seeker Chariot of Slaanesh, 5 Seekers of Slaanesh, which are kind of the cavalry, and 10 Demonettes. Just always doing kind of a bird's eye view on value and things like that. The Chariot alone is a $60 kit, and since this whole box is $85 US if you buy it straight from Games Workshop, this is a phenomenal deal. As with all of the other demon boxes, every unit in here can be summoned, so it's going to pair well with armies that have access to wizards in general. I also like this box, and I point these out for new players all the time. I like boxes that have a good variety of types of units, meaning this one has a large base, like a centerpiece type model. It also has cavalry and your basic infantry. I like having a spread of things. It's visually appealing, and it gets new players to model different types of things. So I always think that's a plus and worth mentioning. And so splitting this, we're going to take a look at each model individually and kind of go over what it does and how it fits into the package of this box. I always like to start off with the basic infantry that you get, because that's where a lot of the synergies are going to build up from. So let's take a look at the Demonettes. Start off, you get 10 of them, and they have a fairly unimpressive stat line initially, and that's where you start to look at the special rules and realize there's more going on here than meets the eye. I can't quite stress enough how having a Rend, even though it's Rend 1, on a basic battle line unit is really, really nice. And not only that, but each Demonette gets 2 attacks, so they're making the most of that Rend. As with all demons, they do have a Bravery 10, which makes you think initially, I'm never going to take Battle Shock tests, but you always take Battle Shock tests. Why? Well, because this unit has access to an Icon Bearer, and basically what that is, it's kind of like their standard, I guess. When you roll a 1 during a Battle Shock test, you add D6 Demonettes to this unit. What that means is, say you lose a handful, but not enough to ever really fail your Battle Shock test, you still take it, because even though you haven't lost anything, you always have a 1 in 6 chance of gaining models back. So it's really important that you always take Battle Shock tests. They can also take a Hornblower, which it kind of forces enemies to re-roll their Battle Shock rolls of 1 in 6 inches. So think of it this way, it's kind of a two-way swing. Your Icon Bearer gives you a bonus if you roll a 1 for your Battle Shock, and your Hornblower penalizes your opponent for doing that. Remember, 1 on a Battle Shock is pretty good for just about anyone. It means you're going to lose the fewest amount of troops, so saying, nope, you have to reroll that and giving them a chance to roll a higher number is really, really awesome in some clutch situations. Particularly, of course, if you are playing against another demon player and they roll a 1 for their Battle Shock to gain guys and you force them to reroll it, it's kind of a kick in the shorts here. Now, of course, you're not always going to be playing Chaos versus Chaos, but it is very thematic and it is a lot of fun. They have a rule called Lithe and Swift, meaning that they can both run and charge in the same turn. This means that basic, very, very basic stat line movement value is kind of deceptive, because they're going to be able to move far more than you can think they can on a given turn, especially when they're in charge range of somebody else. If you think of it this way, really their speed, if you're going after an enemy, is 6, base stat, 6 inches, plus d6, meaning your run charge, and then you can charge. So if you're piling at an enemy like a missile, which is what you should be doing in this army, you actually have a far greater move stat. It's just a lot of it's kind of random, but you can get there really, really quickly. Their rule, called Graceful Killers, means that on a hit roll of 6, they get to do an additional attack. Now remember, this attack also has to roll to hit, so you have to kind of roll them, count your 6s, and then roll that separate amount separately. So say you roll 3 6s, you're going to take 3 more die and roll to hit with those. They're not auto hits. And what's cool about that is that if the unit is 20 demonettes or more, it goes off on a 5+, which means 1 of every 3 hits you throw at somebody is going to generate more hits. Also remember that every single one of these attacks has Rend 1, which is nice. Their last little thing they have on their war scroll is called the Locus of Beguilement. And basically the skinny on that is that enemy units must re-roll hit rolls of 6+ against this unit. Now here's a caveat. It only works if there's a Demon of Slaanesh hero within 6 inches of the unit of demonettes. But the benefit is it prevents your opponent from doing those kinds of exploding attacks that you are doing. It's incredibly situational, but it can be really good when you're going against some units like, say, Blight Kings, for example, where their attacks really just magnify and explode on 6s. You can kind of put yourself in a position to minimize that. And if you haven't noticed the pattern here, which is going to be across every single one of these units, you have a bonus to yourself and a mirrored negative to your enemy. Battle Shock, you want to roll 1s for yours, but you have an ability to stop your opponent from rolling 1s for theirs. You want to roll 5s and 6s, depending on unit size, for exploding attacks, but you have a way to minimize your opponent's exploding attacks. So just kind of keep that in mind, that this army kind of has a mirror of every good and bad thing. Next unit up is going to be the Seekers of Slaanesh. This is your 5-man cavalry unit. And just to point something out, these guys are 2 wounds each. They have a 14-inch base movement and 10 bravery. Yes, please. Remember that they each have 2 melee weapons. They have the Rider, who hits like a demonette, basically, and a Mount, which has the same essential profile, but with no rend on it. Sum total, this means that each one of those individual models has 4 attacks each. To put this in perspective, that means that 5 Seekers has 20 attacks, which is the same as a 10-man squad of demonettes, has the same wounds, because they're 2 wounds each, but they are way faster. They have identical rules for the Icon and the Hornblower. And it's important to note that in matched play, you cannot grow a unit larger than its starting size, which will matter because, units of 5 are so small that if you were to roll that 1 early on, it's not really going to make a difference. They also have the Graceful Killers, so hits of 6 generate more attacks. However, they don't have any bonus because of their unit size, unlike the demonettes. So 6s is just as good as it's going to get. However, to make up for that, they have a rule called Quicksilver Speed, which is a unit can run in charge, just like demonettes. But when it runs 2d6 instead of 1, which is massive. Remember, you've already more than doubled the speed of a demonette. Now they can run 2d6 and still make the charge. And the last thing is the Locus of Swiftness. And this basically gives them +1 to run and charge rolls if a demon Slaanesh hero is within 12 inches. So gives them a little bit of extra speed. Really, unless you have a demon on a steed or a cart or something like that, this is probably going to come to play mostly in the first round, but 12 inches is a pretty large bubble, so they can really take advantage of that, I think, much more than the demonettes with their Locus. Now, truth be told, these are just like demonettes, but they serve different purposes, whereas Sleekers are going to be your upfront kind of assault unit in the early game. Demonettes can really follow up with that aggressive second punch. Again, they're not vastly different in the kind of damage they do. They have a max of Rend 1 in general, but demonettes can take a lot more demonettes per unit than Seekers can take per unit of maxed out Seekers. But both units are really, really great at getting up in your opponent's face immediately, or just being fantastic objective grabbers for battle plans. And the last model in the box is the Exalted Seeker Chariot of Slaanesh. Now this guy comes in at 9 wounds, which is a little bit light for some of those bigger centerpiece models, but unlike some of those bigger centerpiece models, this has a speed of 12, which is actually pretty good for something that size. Has a total of 3 melee weapons. Basically there are 3 demonettes. There's a bunch of whips that they're whipping at people, and then they have 4 steed attacks. So total this is 7 attacks, and what that tells you, this is a hero that doesn't want to stay back. And I say this is a hero, but it's not really a general per se. I mean, it doesn't have a command ability, which is not uncommon for demons, but this is going to be a centerpiece model that's all about getting up in the action. The special rule, called Swirling Shapes and Unholy Hues, is a +1 to your opponent's battle shock if they take the test within 3 inches of this unit on a turn that it charged. This isn't always going to be a huge deal, however, if you make that first charge really, really count, +1 is always fantastic. Excess of Blades. After it charged, roll a die for each enemy model within 1 inch. On a roll of a 4-up, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. Remember, it can hit multiple units with this. So remember, this is important to remember the wording here. It's each model within 4 inches. So if you plow into a unit of, say, Plague Monks, and you have 6 of them within an inch, which is not terribly unreasonable based on how many of them there are, that means you're rolling 6 dice and 4 up, so 3 will go through. That's 3 D3 mortal wounds on average. So keep that in mind, that it is based, you roll as many dice as there are models, but that the unit takes the damage. And last rule to highlight here is Deadly Grace. And really, it's the same 6+ to hit, makes additional attacks. The only reason it's worded differently is because now it applies to the whips, one of the melee attacks called the whips on the model. So it's the same thing that they all have. Okay, so let's step back and take a look at this thing from kind of a bird's eye view. This box is about one thing, and that's about aggression. It has incredible speed, has a lot of possibility for damage output. Every single thing has access to rend, which is fantastic, especially in these smaller games. And every single one of these models has access to kind of increase its damage, meaning you roll 5s or 6s for the Demonettes, they go up to adding more attacks. Seekers of Slaanesh, it's 6s. Chariot, it's 6s again. So it's really, really fantastic that there's so much possibility for higher damage than you would first see on their War Scroll. If you haven't picked it up, factions that are based on movement have a lot of emphasis on board control. By this I mean you're going to have to really, really get used to model placement and thinking ahead. Remember, these are not super strong models, right? They all have a 5-up save, which is easily negated by most things. There's no kind of save after a wound type mechanic. Your biggest model has 9 wounds, which is not a lot for a big model like that. So they're kind of a glass cannon. So you need to kind of plan in your head where everything's going to go, because you know it can get there because they're all super fast, and then strike in just the right way to make things happen. Okay, you are in a glass car traveling at 90 miles an hour, and you need to make this work. Now, I had actually shot a video talking about the Slaanesh rules in the General's Handbook 2017, and I actually decided to keep that separate, just like I said in the intro. So I'm going to link that here and let you guys check it out. But spoiler alert, if you are interested in this box, the rules that they got in the General's Handbook only amplify the things that this box does. So if you like it, it only got better. If you have any interest whatsoever in a Slaanesh themed army or adding Slaanesh demons to your already existing Chaos army, this really is the single best place to go. And one thing I always like to talk about towards the end of these videos is where to go forward. Say you started here and you're looking for ideas on where to expand. I would say a great place to start is getting a wizard in your army. Remember, every single thing in this box, even that huge chariot, is summonable, so that's something you definitely want to consider doing. Whether you buy a wizard separately, or I always, with these demon boxes, always suggest the Slaves to Darkness box. Now, Slaves to Darkness box here is actually something special with Slaanesh because your Slaanesh demons can rush forward and be super aggressive, while the Slaves to Darkness are a little bit slower, and they can actually fall back and kind of claim objectives and do some more of the heavy lifting once the engagement line has been set all the way up your opponent's throat. They actually synergize very well together. If you're serious about really having a fully Slaanesh demon army specifically, buying 2 to 3 more of these boxes is not a bad way to spend your money. Seekers are phenomenal. Those big chariots, they can make 3 different options. I didn't list them all here because frankly, they're all kind of samey. They just do very minutely different things. And demonettes, you're always going to want more demonettes. And if you are looking to have some big centerpiece model that has a little bit more toughness to it, the Keeper of Secrets is ace. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the current model from GW, however, I highly think that they're going to revamp that whenever they get to Slaanesh. And there are a host of great third-party models for this. I actually played a 3-player free-for-all game pretty recently, and one of the opponents brought a Keeper of Secrets, and that thing is way tougher than anything else in the Slaanesh army. I was really surprised by how strong it was. He wiped out an entire unit of, I think it was Crypt Flayers. Just murdered them one turn. It was pretty phenomenal. So folks, that's my thoughts on the Slaanesh Demons Start Collecting box. Like I said, I'll say it one more time. I have the rule review for the General's Handbook 2017 coming out really quickly, and I'll have it linked in. Thank you all so much for your patience during this holiday season. It has been a rough one with all kinds of illness, but I appreciate all of the goodwill, positive vibes that are being sent my way. I love it all. Thank you so much. If you'd like to support the channel in a more personal way and you live in the US, go ahead and click the link down below in the show notes. I actually had a line of gaming mats set in the Realm of Death that are actually really, really awesome, and I only at this point can send things in the US, but they are reasonably priced. They're $75 shipped out the door. No shipping extra or anything like that. Boom, it's all yours in your hand. And you know what? If you don't have any spare cash after the holiday season, I completely understand. I am just so glad that you spent some time with me today. I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Thank you so much, and happy wargaming.